Do you see Israel as an actor seeking peace or trying to give the president more breathing room with Iran?
Well, I think Israel, for many years, has wanted to have a better relationship with the government of Lebanon because, by definition, their common goal is the elimination of Hezbollah as a military force. But for years and years, the government of Lebanon was so weak and under such pressure because of Israeli military actions that it wasn't possible. So I'm not at all surprised that it's taking some time for the representatives of the two governments to make progress. But ultimately, this is in Israel's interest and in the interest of the government, not to mention the people of Lebanon, if they could coordinate in their anti-Hezbollah activities.
Well, you've made no secret of your disdain of the Iranian regime. And the fact is that Iran this evening still appears to control the Strait of Hormuz, killed protesters just this week, is still in control of the nuclear material, or the dust, as President Trump calls it. The Ayatollah is dead, but the government remains in place. Should we be striking Iran right now?
Sure. I wouldn't have given up on the ceasefire. I would have kept on going. This is a lull that benefits only Iran, and I'm sure they're going to take full advantage of it. I will say, though, I would not underestimate the damage that we've done. We've killed hundreds of their top leaders. We've destroyed enormous quantities of their assets, of manufacturing, arsenals, military facilities, more damage to the nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Their air defenses have been leveled. You know, there aren't any Western reporters wandering around Iran looking for damage. They're all on the Arab side of the Gulf reporting every window that gets broken by the Iranians. And the disparity between what we've done to them and what they've done to our friends in the Gulf is almost impossible to imagine in magnitude. So I wouldn't have given them the chance to regroup and re-coordinate. I do think we're seeing signs the government is fractured. I think their inability to come up with a common negotiating position is evidence of that. I suspect there are different parts of the government in charge of different things, perhaps moving in different directions. These are the circumstances where we should continue to give the opponents inside Iran a chance to help pull the regime apart even further at the top and induce its collapse.
You know, the president said today, "Don't rush me," when Bloomberg's Jeff Mason asked him about the timeline. And he said recently he's been pointing to the duration of prior wars, including the Second World War. In Vietnam, he said, "I would have won Vietnam, and I would have won it quickly if I had been president." Are you worried about this type of rhetoric? We're now looking at an indefinite extension to the ceasefire.
Look, I think patience and perseverance are what we need here. And bear in mind that the idea that somehow after 47 years of entrenching itself in power, that what the president first said 4 to 6 weeks was never realistic. And it's 8 weeks now. It's still not realistic. The issue, I think, is whether we can take back control of the Strait in order to allow Gulf Arab oil out onto international markets. And remember, some of that oil is going out through pipelines in Saudi Arabia and the UAE in any event, but we restrict prohibit the exportation of Iranian oil, open the rest of the Strait to get the Arab oil out, calm the markets down. I think we should be prepared to take the time necessary to overthrow the regime.
Okay.
We'll regret it.
You think he could have done better than Kennedy, Nixon, Ford in Vietnam?
Look, it's a very different situation, and nobody's talked about putting boots on the ground. That's why cooperation with the opposition is so important, to help them out. We haven't nearly done enough of that.
Sir, it's Kailey Leinz in Washington as well. When you were talking a moment ago about the idea of securing the Strait, for how long would even having that kind of security be sustainable when this Strait was free and open for transit? Yes, the threat of Iran closing it was always there, but it was not actually closed by the regime until this conflict started. So if we're talking about now having to have a sustained presence in order to secure what is a critical waterway for the global economy, will that have been worth it? Is that the cost of making sure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, if that is even where the diplomatic process can end up?
Well, think of the subsidy we've had for 40 or 50 years in underestimating and therefore lowering the price, the risk factor of Iran closing the Strait. I mean, I think that's pretty significant. The fact is that for those who care about international law, this is not, just Iran taking control. Think what could happen if Turkey did this to the Dardanelles and the Bosporus. Think what would happen in the Strait of Malacca. Think what would happen in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. There's a lot at stake here, so yes, it's worth the effort. And it's important to keep in mind, if we do not open the Strait this time by military force, and it gets open, but Iran, through negotiation, but Iran closes it 6 months from now, a year from now, who's going to open it by military force then? Or are we just going to bargain forever with Iran and leave the Gulf Arabs subordinate to the regime in Tehran?
Well, but that's my exact question. How do you avoid that exact scenario?
By overthrowing the regime.
So overthrowing the regime and the entire IRGC, essentially. I just wonder, sir, where that is going to stop, how deep this really has to go, and if you sense the will of this president to do that.
Well, I don't know what the will of this president is. I'm telling you what my preferred outcome is, not just for the Strait of Hormuz, but for the nuclear weapons threat and the terrorism threat. And if you think closing the Strait of Hormuz is bad now, how bad will it be when Iran has a nuclear weapon? How many people will be prepared to attack them then?
What's the next smart move here if no one's coming to the table, if we do go through another 3 to 5 days, as the president said, maybe it's weeks? Mr. Ambassador, should we be prepared to seize Karg Island, to start following through on some of the opportunities that were outlined early in this mission to take a harder hit against Iran?
There's no need to take Karg Island at all. If Iranian tankers can't get out into the Gulf of Oman, who cares whether we take Karg Island or not? The aim ought to be open the Gulf and open the Strait to commercial vehicles coming into and out of the ports of the Gulf Arabs. And that is doable, and we have plans to do that. My only surprise is why we weren't working on this earlier. It was entirely foreseeable.
So you would have advised the president on this blockade? Understood. Would you have advised the president to do the U.S. blockade of the Strait?
Yes, indeed.
And finally, sir, in our remaining moment with you, knowing you served as national security advisor, that is now a job that is being done by Marco Rubio, who is also the Secretary of State. And I wonder what your assessment is and how you are viewing his influence, if he is supposed to be, as Secretary of State and the United States lead diplomat, pursuing a diplomatic effort while also advising the president on the national security side of this. Is there a conflict there?
Well, they're two entirely different jobs, and I think the administration is suffering from not having the National Security Council perform the role it would normally perform in this kind of situation, to try and make available in a systematic fashion all the evidence the president needs to make a decision, to lay out options for the president, to assess the pros and cons of the options, to consider contingencies that should be avoided, and to follow through that the president's instructions are being carried out. I think they're making decisions by the seat of their pants now, and I don't think that's a good thing.